Hello everyone, and what I want to do tonight is I want to show a little bit in After Effects how to work with the interface itself, specifically with the artboards, working with elements like rulers, grids, guides. I do also want to show a couple extra tools and a little bit of extra elements the like. And once we get through that, I'm going to be making another video for some other elements. So let's begin. So unlike what we've done previously, the big thing we're going to be doing right now is we are going to be making our own preferences for here. So instead of going into inches or any of the other areas that we have over here, we're going to go straight to pixels, and we're going to create two artboards with this way. Now the number I'm going here is 500 by 500. It looks pretty good to me. And we're going to, as I said before, add two artboards for this. Now, we don't really need to worry about the orientation because, again, perfect square, no bigger issues here. But the artboard, as you're going to see, once I hit create, is going to add an extra artboard here. So basically what we're seeing is, again, a second canvas. Now, this could be useful if a person wanted to make an extra presentation and show how like different designs for the same idea or similar designs and so on. I'm just going to zoom out so this is a little easier to see. There we are. And we can add more artboards and also move them around using this little tool that we have over here. This is what's called the Artboard tool. And I'm just going to click this real quick for a moment. And you can see here, first of all, it allows me to move the artboards around. Don't forget, if you hold shift, you can basically move this in a way that's going to be perfect horizontal, vertical, whatnot. And there's two ways you can make the artboards as well. With the Artboard tool selected, you basically just click and drag down like this. If you hold shift, you basically make a perfect square. And if you need to make some adjustments and changes after the fact, well, that's not too difficult to do. In the properties area, while this is selected, of course, you could just go to your upper right, that's right over here, and just put in the number that you need. So I'm just going to go 500 by 500. Ooh, making sure I'm actually saying 500 here. There we are. And I'm just going to try and line these up the best I can. Now, if you're going to be working with multiple designs, I would say at the very least, at first, don't keep your artboards too close together, as if some of the elements do leak out, it can cause some minor irritances here and there. So if you need to see it again, because I want 4 artboards, I'm just going to click and drag this down. If you hold shift, you can keep this a perfect square. But once again, if that doesn't work for you, you can always go to the properties over here, or what I just did over here is I use the artboard option, hit the return button, or enter for those of you who have a PC, and just change this to 500 by 500. Looking good so far. I'm going to hit OK. Now this went a little bit too much in the middle, but that's easy enough to fix. Just moving it like so. There we are. Perfect. Okay, so that's pretty much what I wanted to show for the artboards. Now, I want to show how to add in grids, then rulers, and then guides. Now, easiest way to approach this is we're going to go to our black arrow, aka the selection tool, aka the V as in victory key. There we are. And most of the stuff that you need to do to play around with your interface, you can find in the right area over here. There we go. And again, we're going to start off with the grid in this case. And again, if you're someone who's used to working with a grid instead of with just freehanding it, this can be a useful tool for you. I mean, if you take a little bit closer look over here, you can use the grid as a guide to basically help make whatever kind of designs you're making for yourself. Some artists find this very useful for themselves. And that being said, of course, if we need to see or get rid of the guides and grids and such, we can always go to the grid area over here and get rid of it here. By the way, if for some reason you're not seeing this or the properties isn't available, unlikely, but you never know, you can also see this by going to View, and there should be an option here for grids. Yep, here it is. And you can just bring that up, or you can use the shortcut key for the grid this way. All right. Now, what I like to do now is I want to show the rulers. Now, I would probably say that no matter what, I'm probably going to keep the rulers on at all times because you never know if you could use these, and also if you were to if you do need to do some quick little measurements, this is a huge help for you. So I definitely like using this all the time. Yeah, there we are. Now, a little side note about the rulers in terms of how they are. Whatever kind of measurement system you have, that's what these numbers are going to represent. So right now I have exactly 500 by 500 for each of these different artboards. And a neat little trick, if I go to another artboard, say for this area over here, keep your eye on this number at this time. The moment I click this one, you'll notice that my rulers change. Basically going on the artboard that I currently have selected. I go over here, same deal. You also notice that this area changes too. And speaking of this area, if I go to units and change this to anything else, you'll notice that the numbers up here change again to whatever kind of measurement that we happen to be going with. Also, side note, 500 pixels by 500 pixels is pretty much 7 by 7 inches, as you can see. But I'm going back to pixels for now because I want to work with this. Looking good. All right. Now, this is the last part that's going to go with the whole interface elements and artboards and such over here, is if I wanted to add in something called a guide, I can do so easily by going to the actual ruler itself with my mouse, as you can see, and I could click and drag this to wherever I need this to be. So that actually ends up being pretty helpful for me. And I have to admit, I usually use guides to make sure that if I have any spots and whatnot, that they are basically going in where they need to be and such. So I could also do the same thing over to the left, bringing this over to my right. And again, I'm clicking the actual ruler itself so that we can actually see this. So far so good. Now, if necessary, and right now I basically have the guides on by default to basically to see the guides. And I also have this turned off, the click to lock guides. If you turn this on, it'll make sure that your guides don't move in any way, shape, or form. You turn this off, you can readjust your guides however you need to. Like for example, maybe I didn't get exactly 250 centimeters or whatnot. This makes that whole process way easier. And when I'm done, I can basically lock them up again and I'm good. Also note, with this, you can also delete guides if necessary. And I just hit the delete key over there to do that, so no massive fuss in there. And if I was to go to this area over here, once again, I'm just going to lock this up. And let's say for whatever reason you don't want to get rid of the guides. Like you have this in the most perfect spot. You don't want to get rid of these guides. What can a person do? Well, that's what the guide area over here is for. This is technically called the click to hide guides option. You click this and your guides go away temporarily. They'll come back if you do need them. But if you're ever in a situation, as I said before, where you might need these again, hiding the guides is far more efficient than trying to delete them. But again, it all depends on the situation you're in. So that's pretty much most of what I wanted to show for the guides itself. I'd like to show a couple things with the tools now. Now, last week, we took a look at, of course, the pen tool, and I showed a little bit about the curvature tool. I do want to show this again so you have a chance to see this. And again, for those who need a little refresher, the curvature tool allows a person, as you can see, to make a line of sorts, but big difference compared to what we had before. This line, as you can see, is going to always be rounded. So that makes this part a little bit easier. But one thing that's kind of cool about the curvature tool as well is it does allow you to make adjustments on the fly. So if I just want to move this around a little bit, this allows me to do so quite easily. Also note that if necessary, I can add more points while this is turned on. So that's kind of helpful for me. So if you ever want to do some minor experimentation with your spline, you should be able to do it with this pretty easily. So I'm kind of liking how this is looking so far. Okay. Of course, if I was to go back to the pen tool or any of my other tools, for example, the direct selection tool, aka the white arrow, it has pretty much all the different splines that the previous one had as well. So that's actually kind of nice. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show with that. Let's see what we're doing for time. Okay, you know what? I think we're actually going to keep on trucking and we're going to go into some other topics real quick. Okay, so one other thing I did also want to show, I think I showed this briefly, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a little bit of review, is if a person needs to, they can add exact measurements for whatever shape they need, simply by selecting the shape over here, choose the shape of choice, and it allows you to, if you just give this area a quick little click, please note I didn't click and drag like this. I did a very quick tap like that, and you can get whatever kind of measurement you need. So nice thing about this is if I need to make this exactly 200 by 200 for whatever reason, this will basically give that to me. Now with the circle, or should I say ellipse, and the rectangle, those are pretty basic stuff that you can have there. But if you go to the polygon tool, here's something neat. I can just give this area a quick little tap. And once again, the radius, that's basically how round it's going to be, so to speak. But the sides is the part that's actually kind of interesting. Because if you need to add more sides, say for example, you want to make an octagon, I could go to the sides over here, hit OK, and I got myself my own little octagon in this case. Now something I probably should do before I go any further is I probably should turn on my stroke, because that is currently not turned on, and I want to see my work actually. And that's an undo. Okay, there we are. Because I'm going to be using this later for another part of the lecture, so I want to make sure everyone sees this. Okay, now the star is the same deal. Basically click that, give the area a little tap, and you can actually choose how many points you have with this, as well as changing the radius a bit. So makes this part really easy. Again, I showed that before, but I feel considering some of the stuff we're going to be doing next, it's worth going over again. Now, new material. One of the things that we went over before is if we basically select any of these paths and such, this will allow us to either rotate, as you can see over here. I select the stroke here, I can move this. I go to the corners, I can scale this out. But there's some situations where that might not be enough. I might need to have a little bit more precision when I'm actually doing this. Or maybe I want to focus on one versus another. This is where we get some of the tools that we have over here that we can focus on just rotating, scaling, reflecting, and shear. Or alternatively, we could also go to an option called Object, Transform, and we have a lot of these options over here. Now the move, we're going to go over a little bit more detail later, but let's take a look at some of these other ones. Now what the rotate does is, as you figured it, it'll actually allow you to rotate your object however you need to. But here's something that you should really know. If you were to rotate, kind of like what I'm doing over here, first off, turn on the preview. That's going to help you see where this is going. Yeah, there we are. But it allows you to rotate in exact increments. So if you need this to absolutely be 45 degrees or 90 or whatnot, this will allow you to do that. And I would strongly recommend when you're trying to get certain kind of precision that you do this exactly like so. Now, important safety tip, copy versus OK. Now, what the OK will do is if I hit the OK over here, it's just going to rotate it, I'm done. But if I was to go to Object, Transform, and once again I'm going to the Rotate over here, and if you choose to copy this instead, check out what happens. Not only does it rotate it, but it also makes a copy too. Although that probably kind of makes sense considering what we're doing. But still, it is something to kind of keep in mind when you're doing this kind of work. Now for rotations and some of the other stuff, it might not be the most useful option for yourself. That being said, there are going to be some situations where this does come more in handy. But before I go to that, one thing I want to do, and this is something I didn't go over in my class that I'd like to go over right now. If you ever have a pattern and shape that you need, but you don't really need to make adjustments for it, say for example you have the perfect pattern over here, you could actually move both of these at the same time with a simple trick. If you go to an option called, let's see here, just want to make sure I have the right one. Up, here we go. Object and Group. What this will do is it'll allow you to select two objects simultaneously, or possibly more. In fact, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to hit Command or Control C, Control V, or Command V if you're using a Mac. Yeah, so it's right in the center. That's what I want. Okay, now I'm going to take these three objects, and I'm going to go to Object over here, group this up, and now what this will allow me to do is these three different objects are now somewhat considered one, and that is kind of cool because that means I don't have to select all three of them simultaneously, making some parts a lot easier. And of course I could scale this down and do whatever I need to do, but it is, again, if you're having some kind of complex design, this makes things way easier. So that's one of the reasons why I like it. And speaking of scale, say for example you do need to scale this as well. Say that for whatever reason, let's just going to undo what I did. I need to make this literally half the size of what it is now. Well, once again, Object, Transform. You can go to the scale over here, and you could literally make this double the size by putting this to 200%, or if I need to cut the amount in half, I could go to Uniform, hit 50, and, oh, by the way, when you're going from one area to another, you could either just go to another section or just hit Tab. That also does the same thing. And there it is, exactly 50%. This is going to be a useful option if you absolutely must have precision when you're scaling down. Also, don't forget, preview's your friend. So you could basically see a little bit of before and after when you're doing this. But I'm pretty happy with that. And I don't really need this as a copy, so I'm just going to hit OK. Okay, so let's see the other transforms here. So we've already done scale, we've done rotate. We're save and move for later. I'd actually like to try and use the shear option. We're going to do some fancy stuff with reflect in a second, so let's focus on these. Okay, so to get started, you basically select your object like I did, go to shear, and what this is going to do is the shear allows you to skew your object in a specific direction. Sometimes a little bit will do the job, and sometimes people like to shear quite a bit. And everything has kind of a different way it gets sheared, so I just want to show that right now. Go to Object, Transform, Shear, and just moving this one over a little bit. And I'm just going to turn this down a little, and you can kind of see the difference over here, and that's kind of nice. So, going to hit OK. That's all set. Now, when it comes to our next part, and this is going to be reflection and move. So let's do the reflection first, so we can take a moment to talk about this. So I'm sure that everyone has tried to make some kind of shape or logo. I'm going to make myself a little bit of a heart here, but unlike what I've done previously, I'm going to make this half a heart. And I'm going to try and line this up the best that I can. Now, unlike what I've done before, I'm going to hit the V key, or you could also hit Escape to basically make this half. And I'm going to add a small guide here. I'm actually going to turn on my guides again. Kind of need that for a second. There we are. So I can put my anchor points exactly where they need to be. So this one's going to go over here. This one's going to go here. And again, the whole point of this, which I'm sure that most of you have figured out, is I'm going to be using this. Just going to get rid of the little point that I have over here because that's looking kind of nasty. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. I just wanted to adjust that a little bit, so thank you for your patience. Okay, so this is basically all set and ready to go. Okay, so what I would do at this point now is I would use the reflect so I could basically make a perfect copy of this and put it to the other side. Easy enough to do. You go to Object, Transform, Reflect, and it's already on vertical, so I'm pretty good on this right now. And again, I make sure that this is lining up nicely. All I need to do for this is just make a quick little copy. Awesome. So next I'm going to, now that the copy's made, I'm going to move this to the other side, holding Shift to make sure that it stays well. Only thing that I'm going to do that's going to seem a little strange at first is I'm keeping these a little separate from each other. But I think you get the idea of basically what I did. If you need to see it again, I'm going to do it one more time. So I select my shape over here. I'm going to go to Object, Transform, Reflect. And once again, just make sure that it's a vertical one instead of a horizontal, because if it's horizontal, it's going to look like this, obviously. And that's pretty much it. Just hit copy at this point, and then move this over to the side. And I'm giving a little bit of breathing room. You will see the reason why momentarily. Now, you might think that we could use the group to basically make this one, but in this case, this wouldn't be the best idea because technically, and I'll show you what happens. So with these two selected, there we go. So just want to make sure they're both selected. All right, here we are. You'll notice if I try and group these up and watch the little layer that we have over here, object group, it still keeps these as separate objects technically. So that's kind of how group works in this case. So what I'm going to do is I want these to be one singular object. So this is how you do it. You can go to Object over here. You can go to Path and Join. And what's going to happen here, once you go over here, you'll notice that that not only are they joined together when I select this, but there's a little bit of a dot over here that gets connected by this little line. So that's actually kind of nice. So what I could also do after that is I can go to my object again, and if I go to Path again and choose Join a second time, of course it helps if you actually select it, Object, Path, Join, you'll notice that this little area over here is also joined. Now later on, should you choose to, you could always bring these a little closer and you're good to go. So that's pretty much what that particular object option could do. Now the last thing I want to do, and this is going to help in particular assignments, is I'm going to use the Move tool to basically make myself a checkerboard. So before I do that, I'm going to make myself a new layer because that's going to make things way easier. And I'm going to once again use precision to make myself a perfect rectangle. I'm just going to click in this corner over here, make this exactly 500, or not 500, I'm sorry, 50 by 50 pixels. Now the reason why I'm doing this is I have a canvas here that's 500 by 500. So this is going to be a small fraction of this and end up looking pretty nice and such. I'm going to go to my fill that with black color. Yeah, there we are. It wouldn't be a bad idea to zoom in a little bit. Use the Z key for this. But I want this to be exactly in the corner, like so. I would strongly recommend, at least at this time, to also turn off your stroke. It gets rid of any confusing elements here. Looking nice. So yeah, I got a great looking square over here. I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to select the black arrow, go to Object, Transform, and Move. So this is where the move actually becomes helpful, because what I could do here is start off at 0, just so I could get a starting point here, make sure my preview is here. And little tip, if I wanted this to look like a checkerboard, and I'm actually going to show an example of a checkerboard right now, so we can get an idea of what I'm looking for. So I'm doing a quick Google search for checkerboard. Again, when you're ever doing any kind of assignment, it's always a good idea to do a little research first. So, not going to lie, this is a very basic checkerboard over here, but you'll notice that each area has this little gap in between them, and that's something we need to emulate. Good news, as I said before, this new option for Move makes that much easier. So I need this to be double the size going toward my right. So going to go to my little pixel area over here, change this from 0 to 100, and I'm going to use the copy option to copy that over. Hey, take a look at that. I got the perfect break between the two. Now here's another pro tip. If you go to Object, Transform, As long as you don't select something else or do something different, the transform again, allows you to basically make a copy of the last transformation we did. So if I hit Control D, that brings that over. Object, transform, a little hard to hit sometimes. Control D again. Or if you just hit Control D or Command D, that does the same thing. So my first line for my checkerboard, all set to go. Awesome. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to Object, Transform, and I have them all selected, by the way, because what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to move this not horizontally at first, but vertically first. Now this one I do want to go down the same body amount, so this is going to be 50, and I'm just going to hit OK to get started. Oh, I take that back. I'm going to go to Transform, Move. By the way, a little bit of a safety tip. If you hit Undo, you lose your numbers over here as well. So just be careful about that. Going to hit Copy this time. Again, previous time was my mistake. And I also want to bring this over if you remember our reference. So once again, Object, Transform, and Move. And once again, not going to go vertically this time, but I am going to go horizontally, 50 units. Hey, take a look at that. That's pretty close. Looks like I might need to make my corner over here a little bit bigger, but I'll get to that in a moment. So once again, selecting both these areas, and once again I'm going to go to Object, Transform, Move, but this time I'm actually going to just bring that straight down. So, but in this case it's 50 plus 50 pixels, so I need to bring this down twice, pretty much the addition of both of these, which would be 100. So I'm going to go vertically, going to change that to 100 in this case, hit Copy. Hey, take a look at that. Perfect. So going to do the same thing several times. Command or Control D, Command and Control D, Command and Control D, and there I am done. And I'm making myself a pretty good looking checkerboard in this case. The canvas could be a little bit bigger, but at least for the purposes of what we're doing right now, this actually works out kind of nice. So just doing one last check over here. Oh, that's why it didn't work. It wasn't exactly 500 by 500 pixels. So I need to bring this down just... Oops. So I need to bring this up and over just a smidge. If necessary, just get as close as you can. Perfect. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. Now, one last little tip, at least for here, then I have one last thing I want to show, I promise this time, and then I think we can call it a night. What would happen if we wanted to add a different color for this background? Well, good news. You use your layers, it's really easy. I go to my Create New Layer option over here, bring this down. Then I could use my square option. I'm just going to bring this up to the corner. If you're worried that you might accidentally select something you didn't mean to, you can always lock up said layer. Yeah, that's much better. Oop. This layer, I mean. I'm just going to go to the upper corner like this. I'm going to make this exactly 500 by 500 because that's the size of my canvas. And obviously I need to make this a different color. Easy enough to do. Just going to choose red. Ha, nice. I'm just trying to put this in the best place possible, and there I am. So it might not be 100% accurate, but the design and pattern is what I'm looking for the most. And this fulfills that perfectly. Yeah, that's great. So one last thing I want to show as promised, and then I'll call it a night. And that is, I want to basically make adjustments and changes to a already existing pattern. So what I mean by that is I'm just going to create myself a very quick little Curvature Tool design. Oh, it's actually over here already, so I could just go over here. Again, I'm changing the stroke for this. Now previously, if you need to change the size of the stroke, there's two ways that I showed, but there's a third one I'm going to show today. First, you could either go to the overall stroke, and in the little point area over here, you could make it thicker or thinner, depending on your needs. The second method was to go to the stroke area over here, and you could go to the profiles, and it has a bunch of presets on how you could basically change the design of this area. You might find it useful, you might maybe not so much. If you have to go back to default, you could go to uniform, as you see there. And last but certainly not least, and this is something new, I can go to what's called the width tool. It looks like it actually kind of looks like a little peep. You click this, and all you would need to do at this point, if you want the line to be thicker or thinner in very specific ways, just click the line. And again, if you just bring this up, you'll see that this area gets thicker. And I'm basically selecting my points in this case. You have to be careful, because if you get the area where the points meet, sometimes things get a little weird. But that's basically what this could do over here. And also a bit of a heads up, if you go to the width profile, change this to uniform, this puts it back to normal. So I'm hoping that some of you will find some of the information that I showed here useful for the assignment that's going to be coming up. And this kind of concludes most of the elements that I did want to show in class. My biggest way you're going to learn is to practice these elements, so hopefully you'll take an opportunity or two to do that. But as long as you give it a try and keep on practicing, you should see some better results. And I think, again, let's actually stop this at this point. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I hope that you found this informative, and I look forward to the next one.